Good morning, everybody. Welcome today to the meeting of the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee. I first introduce our top table. Here to my left, I have Councillor Sheila McCall, our Vice Convener. We have Elaine Ritchie, Strategic Lead of Housing and Communities, Arun Singh, Strategic Lead for Children, Families and Justice, and Jessica Gill from Democratic Governance Officer. Can you confirm apologies, please?
We have apologies today from Bailey Ahern with Councillor Duff substituting and Bailey Brock with Councillor Cuthbert substituting. We've got 4 members online. I'll ask to confirm they're present. Councillor James.
Good morning, Jess. Yep, loud and clear.
Councillor Mayer.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
I'm here, thanks.
And Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, I'm here too.
Thank you. All other members are in the Chambers convener.
I'm not seeing any declarations of interest coming through, so we'll take that as nil. Minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree the minute for the 1st of October? Thank you very much. Outstanding business statement. Are we happy that there are items on here that are now complete can be removed? Does anybody have any questions related to the outstanding business statement? Thank you very much. So we'll accept that from the outstanding business statement. So I'll now move the chair to Councillor McCall for items 5 and 6 on today's agenda.
Thank you, Convener. Item 5 on today's agenda. Is that better? It's not like me to be such a shrinking violet. No. Good morning, everyone. We now turn to item 5 on the agenda, which is a paper on violence against women and girls, and I would invite Detective Inspector Kevin Mollison of Police Scotland to provide his presentation on this subject. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Apologies, I've got a bit of a cold, so my voice is a bit croaky now and again, but I'll do my best, and if I start coughing out, I'll quickly get stopped. Yeah, so I've been asked to give a short presentation in relation to violence against women and the safeguarding approaches we take in regard to that, and specifically the collaborative nature of that. Just a short spiel about myself. Like I say, I'm Kevin Mollison. I'm a detective inspector within our public protection safeguarding teams. I have overall responsibility for domestic abuse safeguarding in Tayside. So basically, if we move on to slide 2, please. Thank you. So Police Scotland is committed to protecting the people of Scotland, and we will continue our dedication to improve our services for victims of gender-based violence. Police Scotland has a critical role to play in preventing violence and safeguarding women and girls. Our vision is to create a society and a culture where women and girls live free from all forms of violence, abuse, exploitation and harassment. Domestic abuse accounts for almost 1/4 of violent crime in Scotland. It leaves countless victims in constant fear. Every 9 minutes we respond to another call, but we know this is only a fraction of the abuse occurring in our communities. The truth is a much darker and sinister picture. Key to this is a collaborative approach with partners, and there are several processes at our disposal to prevent and safeguard women and girls from harm. Next slide, please. So those processes that I'll be discussing and highlighting are our DS, DAS, MARAC, MATAC, promotional campaigns, and PIP. I'll go into them one at a time in more detail shortly, but I just want to add that without these processes, without this, these processes will likely fail if we don't have collaboration, which will result in heightened risk of for potential to victims and their family. Next slide, please. So DSDAS, this is a disclosure scheme, Domestic Abuse Scotland. It's the equivalent of what is known as Clare's Law in England and Wales, which you've probably all heard of. It's quite well publicised. This provides a formal way of sharing information about a partner's abusive past with a potential victim. It focuses on identifying the level of risk posed by the potential perpetrator and managing that risk at every stage of the process. It's a time-bound process that should take no more than 45 days to complete, from initial application to providing the disclosure. And then there's two ways the applications can be made. The first one is right to ask. That's where, for example, a female can make an application direct to ourselves to ask about their current partner if we hold any information of relevance that could pose a risk to her. The other one is what we call a power to tell. That's where, like, sort of maybe a family member or even the police or a third-party agency can make an application to ourselves to search to see if there's any information that we hold that could indicate that that person is potentially a risk to the female. It's a decision making. The decision making is done multi-agency wise. It's not just ourselves, and the people that do that are the police, are independent domestic abuse advocates, criminal justice, social work, health, women's aid, and any other relevant agency that might hold information regarding that individual. These meetings are held on a weekly basis, and approximately we'll sort of discuss 10 cases at a time. If we move to the next slide, please. So there we have just a breakdown in general of the stats we've had over the last 3 years. 3 years. As you'll see, the numbers kind of do rise. 2023, we had 360 applications, and that resulted in 63 disclosures being made in Perth and Kinross. You'll notice that applications and disclosures given, there's a change in the numbers there, but what that means is certain applications we get sometimes don't meet the criteria for sharing any information. That could be there's no information held, or the information we hold is no longer relevant to the individual. But I think most importantly to note is that our applications are coming up. We had 101 for Perth and Kinross in 2023, 136 in 2024, and in 2025 we're currently sitting at 126. That was just the end of October, and that will surpass the 136 was from the year before. There is a bit of a push on just now through coming from the directive from Scottish Government to promote DSDAS further, and so we do anticipate that these numbers will continue to rise. Next slide, please. So MARAC, this is our multi-agency risk assessment conference, and it's a multi-agency process of assessing and managing high-risk victims of domestic abuse and their families. No single agency or individual can see the complete picture of the life of the victim, but all may have insights that are crucial to their safety. The primary aim of MARAC is to work in partnership to enhance the safety of victims of domestic abuse. So again, we've got participants here, we've got Police Scotland, we've got our local authority, social works, which are children and families and adult, health board representative, Women's Aid, Action for Children. We've got RASAC there and independent domestic abuse advocates as well. And then also again, depending on who has other information, they will also be in the meeting. And in Perth and Kinross, it's fortnightly meetings we'll hold in relation to this, and approximately be about 5 cases will be heard at those meetings, with each case taking approximately 12 to 15 minutes to discuss. They are meant to take around about 12 to 13 minutes, but that's not a rigid time framework. If it's deemed that a case needs to be discussed for 30, 40 minutes, it will be discussed for the length of time. The main point is that we make sure that all the information is shared that we need to know, so that we make an informed decision how best to safeguard that woman and her family. Next slide, please. So then there we have the stats in relation to P&K for the last 3 years. And as you'll see there, 123 in 2023, 122 in 2024, but already in 2025, up till just recently in the last week or so, was a 136, and that will be being surpassed. What we're finding is that the main contributors to MARAC are majority are police and domestic abuse services. We're trying to put a push on to have other partners, as in social work, health and that, to also submit applications for any concerns of families they need to have, and that's ongoing. And again, we anticipate that the numbers will continue to rise. Next slide, please. So MATAC, this is our multi-agency tasking and coordination process. This is aimed more at targeting perpetrators to stop their behaviour and prevent any further victims. So the key aims of MATAC are through effective partnership work in identifying those domestic abuse perpetrators who present the greatest risk of harm to victims and their families. Through tasking and coordination, the use of proactive enforcement, actively target those identified perpetrators using all available methods to the group's disposal to reduce the threat posed by them. And it's to share information for intelligence development, prevention or enforcement where appropriate, thereby achieving positive outcomes for victims and families. And the main objectives of MATAC are to reduce the number of domestic-related homicides in Scotland, reduce the number of repeat victims of domestic abuse in Scotland, increase the number of domestic abuse-related crimes and offences detected, and increase proactive inquiries to tackle non-domestic abuse-related offending by perpetrators of domestic abuse. Again, participants are Police Scotland, we've got local authority housing, we've got the Fiscal Service, Criminal Justice Social Work, Women's Aid, and independent domestic abuse advocates. And the meetings are held on a monthly basis, and they're not specific to just P&K. It's a Tayside-wide meeting that's held monthly where these are discussed. Next slide, please. And there again, we have a breakdown of how that's been reflected across Tayside and more particularly in Perth and Kinross for the last 3 years. The numbers do fluctuate, but then that is just depending on who comes to our attention and what they're known for and who's potentially at risk for them as well. Next slide, please. So we also have the use of promotion campaigns as well at our disposal to promote safeguarding. At the moment, we've got That Guy, which has run for a couple of years and is award-winning as well. This campaign aims to reduce sexual violence by having conversations with men about male sexual entitlement and encourage them to challenge harmful attitudes and behaviours among their peers. We have a new one, it's called Choose to Stop. That's a campaign in partnership with Respect, which highlights how controlling behaviour can turn a loving relationship into an abusive one. It's similar to the That Guy campaign as such as trying to encourage males to identify their behaviour and talk about it and change their ways. And then, as I've already mentioned, DS-DAS, that's being promoted as we speak on online platforms and certain TV formats as well. Next slide, please. And then we also have the Partners Intelligence Portal. This is a secure online platform allowing the reporting of intelligence from partner agencies to the police. It can be accessed 24/7 and negates the need to report in person. It anonymises the source of the information and all users are trained prior to being granted access to the system. Information is managed by Police Scotland and disseminated accordingly. It's not used as a crime reporting platform. This has only been on the go for a couple of years and we're getting a good return from it. Gone are the days where you're having to try and phone somebody in a police office and try and share some information with them. This can be now done on an online form, which is then picked up by ourselves and dealt with accordingly. Final slide, please. So in conclusion, I think I've been able to show there that key to the processes is consistent collaborative working and effective and relevant information sharing. Without this, the processes will likely fail, resulting in the heightened levels of risk for potential victims and their families. That is the conclusion of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has anything they would like to ask.
Thank you, DI Mollison. Does anyone have any questions, please? I see Councillor Forbes, you have 2 questions.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thanks, Kevin, for that interesting presentation. A couple of questions going back to the first or the second slide. I think you said there was a 45-day turnaround for information. It kind of struck me as quite a long time if people are genuinely in fear of their well-being. Do you think that's a reasonable time frame, or is there any ambition to get that down a bit, or did I mishear you?
No, that's a reasonable question, Councillor. The 45-day is our absolute maximum time limit for getting the application, from the time we get the application to giving the disclosure. If we have information that's received that we deem it to be high risk and it needs to be shared as a matter of urgency, then we will hold what we call basically an emergency DSDAS meeting. The day we get it is the day we'll research it, discuss it, and agree on what's to be disclosed, and then we'll get that done as soon as possible.
Thanks very much. That's reassuring. And my second question is about wider, and I know that we're talking about violence against women today, but does the process work for men as well, if men are at risk of domestic violence?
Yes, yeah, the process is designed in such a way that it can be used for that as well, yeah.
So is that your two questions? Yeah, thank you very much. Can I now call on Bailey Mike Williamson, please?
Thank you, Sheila. My question is about the figures we've just posted there. I take it they're a bit of a moving feast as people move through the judicial system. So there's a bit of a time lag between someone getting charged and then convicted in the judicial system. So that may reflect on your figures historically once people have become convicted. Is that correct?
It can do, but in relation to the sharing of information, Councillor, you could almost say that's done live time, because it's information we hold at the time, regardless of where they are in the judicial system. So I appreciate what you're saying, as in from a time that somebody is charged till then they appear at court. But we will already hold information regarding risk in relation to that individual. So it can get shared before they've appeared at court, if you know what I mean. Does that explain?
Yeah. That's fine. I was just trying to figure out that there may be someone there who has been charged but not convicted, and I was just trying to reconcile it in my head. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Can I call now on Councillor Bob Braun, please?
Thanks, Mark. Convener. Thank you, Kevin, for your presentation. Going back to the first part, which was DSDAS, when you were talking about the figures, you mentioned that the information depending on criteria, I think you said, and I just what is the criteria that you spoke of?
The criteria is that, just excuse me, I turned on the board for the exact wording. It's basically there's concerning behaviour demonstrated that includes a pattern of behaviour that indicates that they're exercising coercive control against that person. Now that can be a number of things. You know, it could be offending as in abusive behaviour, offending as in physical, sexual, emotional, or even if they're trying to just show that they're trying to exercise a limit of control over an individual as well. So it's quite wide ranging. We will take that into consideration along with what we know about that person's character as well, their previous character with other people as well.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. And finally, can I call upon Councillor Jack Welch, please?
Thank you, Vice Convener. My question is really around these trends are rising, and you believe that some of the online influencer activity by individuals such as Andrew Tate is driving some of this statistical increase in violence against women and young women and in general? Thank you.
I can only give my own sort of opinion and experience in answer to that, because I don't have any data to reflect that. However, I'd probably be in agreement with that. I think what we have here is a societal issue. You know, people do have more freedom to express their views on a bigger platform, which is easier reached by others as well, who are influenced by that. But I think at the same time, we also have a better understanding now of abuse, what isn't acceptable in society now, and we have better processes in place, as I've just described, that allow people to report that and for us to act upon that. So, in answer to your question, I agree with you personally. That's not a Police Scotland view, that's my own view. It's a bit of a worry, but it just seems to be that we're going.
Thank you. And I've got a follow-up question, Vice Convener, if possible, as well. I'll maybe just go ahead and ask it. In terms of those individuals that essentially, come to your attention and essentially are where disclosures are given against them, are you finding that there's a general sort of pattern for example, there are, the same people that are maybe involved in criminality are also involved against violence against women, and from that perspective, are known by a number of agencies? Thank you.
Yes, I would say. Unfortunately, we have people that come to our attention on a regular basis. And it's certainly the same within the domestic abuse world. When we find out that a woman is in a relationship with a certain male, that immediately can raise flags with us because we're aware of his previous offending. So unfortunately, there are individuals who follow a pattern and they will move from female to female. And I think this is the beauty of the DS-DAS system, in that we can identify that at an early stage and try and prevent anything further from happening by disclosing the information we hold over that individual.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can I now ask Councillor Ian James?
Thanks, Vice Convener. Great presentation, Kevin. Thank you. And my question really follows on from one of my colleagues previously asked. I know this is violence against women and girls, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, especially in this committee, but as a victim myself, a domestic violence victim, quite often you'll find the victim won't report themselves, or it's unknown. The domestic violence is an unknown factor. However, neighbours play an important role. They'll hear what's going on frequently. You spoke a lot about partnership working. Is there a means by which the public, I'm thinking neighbours in general, can report concerns? I'm just looking at Marac, there's a lot of agency working, but is there something that the general public can report in? Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing to stop a neighbour from phoning in using either 101 or 999 if they believe it's an emergency, to call in and report to us. Regardless of the gender of the victim of domestic abuse, everyone will be treated the same. The same level of service will be given to that victim, and we'll do the best we can for that victim as well. Where the system does fall down, unfortunately, is support for male domestic abuse victims, as in third sector. We do struggle for that. We don't have, at this moment in time, a statutory agency that we can go to. There is a third-party agency called Fear Free that we can signpost male victims to, but we don't have a statutory footing or an agreement in place for direct referral from ourselves to them. So what we do then is we speak to the victim and say, look, there's this agency called Fear Free, please contact them and they can assist. There was another one I was aware of just the other day that I saw online. The name of them it escapes me, unfortunately. I do apologise, but it was good to see that at least there is somebody else out there trying to provide a service to male victims. I think that it's better in the central belt, Edinburgh, Glasgow way, just for the volume of what goes on there, but certainly up our end here in Perth and Kinross, it's not so prevalent, unfortunately.
Thanks for that, appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor James, and I want to thank you as well for your openness and sharing your personal experience. I think I should also perhaps just say to everybody that although this particular period of time is focused in on violence against women and girls, as a council, we take a much more broader view about domestic violence generally across the board, particularly in support of our staff members and our management team and our colleagues in the council. Our officer colleagues are supported and in fact given training to be able to spot and support any employee, whether male or female, suffering from domestic abuse. So thank you, Councillor James, for your openness, like I said, and for your question. Can I now call on Bailey McLaren, please?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Convener. It's really just, I suppose, a follow-on from Councillor James and Councillor Forbes. You know, these campaigns are very much fronted as female violence against women, as we're discussing. Is there going to be, maybe you don't know, but is there going to be a sort of approach that maybe would take out that gender aspect of it or add in? Because I'm picking up that possibly the violence against males is under the radar a bit, but still quite a serious concern. So, and as Councillor James has just sort of explained, and are we picking it up enough? What level is it in all these numbers that you've given us? Could we get a flavour of where that sits in this picture?
I don't have data to hand that can identify to me the gender of the victims at this moment in time. What I do know is that it's underreported. That goes without saying for male victims. We do what we can to try and promote that and encourage people to come forward. It's very difficult. I'm sure you'll appreciate for people to come forward and report. And I think there's still that stigma there for male victims of domestic abuse to have the courage to come forward and report to us. I'm not aware of any specific campaign or in the future that's to promote to males, certainly not in our area, but it's something that needs to be considered and taken forward. I just think we just need to keep having these conversations to try and encourage people to come forward. And as Councillor James mentioned about neighbours, you know, let's encourage these people to speak, because until we're told, we can't really do anything about it, unfortunately, which is the frustrating thing. So I'd like to think through time that people will have the confidence to come forward.
Thank you. I think Jennifer Middlemiss would like to come in just on this particular subject.
Thank you. In relation to interventions with regards males, we are the figures suggest that, you know, and that's quite obvious, that 86% of women are at risk of violence against, you know, of violence. So that is why we have the partnership that is in relation to violence against women and girls. So whilst we look at the gender-based approach, and we do cover all of that, and we look at that very proactively in the partnership. So any kind of concerns that we have in relation to male, we do get that reported in, and we will look at that very proactively and see if there's any interventions that we can bring in at a local level. So it's not discounted. We do cover all genders. Although we are a violence against women and girls partnership, we still make sure we're very inclusive across for all genders. So again, if there is anything untoward, we make sure we're dealing with that as and when the issue should arise proactively.
Thank you, Jennifer. Can I now call on Councillor Mayer, please, to ask your question?
Thanks, Vice Convener. This question relates to the MATAC system you were talking about, Kevin. In the slide it said that you identify and target the perpetrators who are picked up through that. Can you give us a wee flavour of what that targeting does? Are you actually taking action against them, or is there something else that you're putting in place just to monitor them? Thank you.
No, it's a completely proactive approach. If we become aware of somebody who's a domestic abuser, then we'll have a look into their background as well. And if there's other victims of domestic abuse perpetrated by them, that's shown as maybe undetected, or they didn't engage the first time when we tried to speak to them about that, they'll be revisited with a view to building a strong case against that individual. MATAC targets are people who pose a significant risk. It's not just anybody and everybody that would be a MATAC target. And you usually find that the MATAC targets, when they appear at court and they're found guilty, they get lengthy sentences as well. We have a dedicated team, the Domestic Abuse Task Force, who are one of our national teams, and their job is to specifically target the high-risk MATAC targets. So they will build the cases for these individuals. You appreciate that some of these individuals travel across the country, so there's different victims in different areas of the country as well, and that takes time to put all together. So it's a proactive approach, and the sole purpose is to build a case to get that person arrested and put in the jail and away from everyone and reduce the risk from them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. And Bailey Williamson, you have another question, please?
Yes, I do. Thanks very much, Sheila. My question is about, whilst we're talking about partners, etc., the main perpetrators of violence against women, I was just wondering if you'd like to comment about the potential for other family members as well. And is that a significant problem? For example, it could be sons or other family relatives who could be the perpetrators of violence.
Yeah, it could be. They wouldn't be dealt with using these processes that I've just talked about just now. Our definition of domestic abuse is basically it has to be within a partner setting, so husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, or boyfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend, girlfriend. Where it's child on parent or another family member, that'd be treated as per normal, as in a normal assault and such like.
Would it be possible just to come back? Do you have any data on those sort of figures? What that actually might look like in reality? Is it as bad as partner husband against wife violence, or I was just wondering what the figures for that look like?
I don't know. I'll be perfectly honest. I've not seen any data in relation to that type of offending.
Thank you, Mike. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. So that actually leads me on quite nicely to the question I wanted to ask myself. And that is really about the partner agencies that you work with. And I noticed that excluded from those, or not included, sorry, should I say, is adult protection and child protection. And I know that members of police and social work, etc., do attend and participate in those committees. But perhaps, leading on from what Bailey Williamson asked about, is perhaps an avenue where the consequential impact to others, particularly children, perhaps might be picked up. So I'm just wondering what engagement you have with those particular organisations, but also with the adult protection or for the public protection policing service that we have. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies. I should have been a bit more clearer as was given. I was just trying to give generalisations as in who's involved. I didn't think you want to have a whole list of, because believe you me, we could go into the 20s about partners. Child protection, adult protection teams, we work very closely with them. We have our child protection teams that have been established for a long, long time now. They were co-located most of the time with them, working closely together for child protection between police and child protection social work. And latterly through adult protection as well. We now have a dedicated adult protection team here based at headquarters in Dundee to look at all adult support and protection matters, and now working closely with the adult protection social work teams as well across the whole of Tayside. I would say they would pretty much be our core partners, our CP and AP teams, and we've built up really good relationships with them. Working together, trying to get the legislation to work, especially with the adult stuff. It's unfortunately become a bit more prevalent in the last couple of years now. Adult protection, how we take forward the investigations into that. The certainly CP is something we've had on the go for years now. I mean, I don't know if you're aware that there's now the Bairns House model that's come into play across Scotland. Co-location and how we deal with children, not just police and social work, with health as well. So I should have been clear when I was providing my presentation there, but our AP and CP, we work very, very closely with them, and it's a great working relationship we have.
Thank you. I think that's a really important point to make, because both of those, both adult and child protection, do have anonymous lines that concern neighbours or friends or acquaintances can contact, and that would include a whole range of issues, but particularly around domestic abuse, gender neutral. So I think that's an avenue that people should be aware of. Which might be something we can think about, and how to ensure that access to that sort of help, or to be able to report concerns, is perhaps more widely known and better used. But that's perhaps a conversation for another day. I don't see. Oh, I have a final question here for Councillor Braun.
Sorry, Vice Premier, I just suddenly thought of something while you're asking your question. We've obviously heard from you, Kevin, that the numbers are rising of violence against women. I think you implied, well, you didn't give any figures, but and obviously various reasons, and you mentioned it's becoming perhaps more socially acceptable. I just want to say, I mean, the number of, just to cover the point off, the number of men who do actually abuse women with violence is still a minority, a significant minority. Would I be right in saying that?
I don't know if I quite understand your question when you say a minority, as in number of men in the whole general population of men.
I would say, yes, generally speaking, the men who commit violence against women are still a minority, if it's general as that.
Yes, I would say so, yes. Yeah, we're not at the stage where the majority of men are abusing women on a regular basis, thankfully.
Thank you, Councillor Braun, for that question. And Councillor Carol Mayer.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Sorry, Kevin, to come back yet again. I know your cold has taken as big a toll on you as mine is on me. My question actually that just came to mind there on was to do with the age demographic of male on female or female on male, but mostly male on female. As our population is ageing so much in Perth and Kinross, are you finding now that you're getting an increased number of domestic abuse victims in the much older age category than perhaps there used to be?
That's a very good question.
Sorry, and if that's a particularly tricky one to deal with, thanks.
No, that's a very good question. Thanks for that. What I can say is that we're slowly having an increase in reporting from an older age group, an older age demographic. We believe the reason for that is probably down to the soap operas on television, who are now, they're covering these topics. And what we're finding is that we are getting older people are starting to report. It's very difficult for older people to report. And I believe that's just down to how they've lived their life, for a generation of what went on behind doors, stayed behind closed doors. And this is I wouldn't say the word is issue, but we've recently had a case, I'll not go into the details, that involves an elderly couple. And it was discussed recently at Marach, and we all had significant concerns for the lady, and because of the domestic abuse she had been suffering, and she was determined that she will not report this to us. She refuses to engage with the process. So we're trying to do what we can as a collective to best support. But a lot of that is because they've been married a long time, and they've had their time together and such like. So, but we are seeing slowly but surely older people are starting to report.
Thank you for that. And I think you're probably right. It's probably a hidden issue because people have been married for 40, 50, 60 years, perhaps have a very different view of what marriage and living in partnership with another person looks like from us. Thanks for your answer.
Thank you, Councillor Mayer. Jamie Allen, do you want to make a comment here at this point?
Yeah, I appreciate Kevin's done a great job. I kind of just sat back and listened, and he's getting asked a lot of questions. I would definitely say since, and this has probably been said many a time, but since Police Scotland started, I would say with the emphasis moving towards violence against people in domestic situations, that has just increased certainly from when I joined the police early 2000s. The onus on identifying and investigating it better has improved a lot. And we continue to get better. And I just think this is an ongoing thing with society becoming more open about their feelings and things affecting them in life that they maybe would have hidden before. I do see that there's a generational thing there happening where we're getting things reported to us because people feel they can now. And there's people out there assisting them. So I don't think society itself is becoming more violent against people in domestic situations. I'm not necessarily saying that's the case, because I think we're getting better at being more open about it now than it was probably hidden a lot in the past. And then I'd say years ago, there's probably plenty of coercive behaviour certainly that occurred that was never reported, or people didn't even feel that was the case. And nowadays we're just far more open about it in terms of starting to say what's affecting us, which would have been held in the past. And we are getting, as a police service, we're just getting better as well at how we deal with this and how we proactively go after people who we think are really damaging to society. And there was one very recently, Keelan Ward, who's made the media, who got 18 years living in Perthshire, which was domestic abuse, ultimately a domestic abuse case, which is a fantastic result and significant jail sentence for something that was impacted on the lives of a number of women. But I just wanted to say that, although Kevin said it, I do think we're getting better at it. In terms of the neighbours and all, yes, they're not at the meetings, but it's a standard thing whenever we deal with a domestic incident at all. We'll always look to speak with neighbours and always go around and gather as much evidence as we possibly can. And we, with body-worn video as well, it's going to help a lot as well in upcoming cases, I would say, because we're seeing it already where what's described on a report, nothing beats the initial arriving at the scene with that body worn and seeing the distress of someone and seeing the scene itself. The picture says 1,000 words when you're getting that live imagery, which we'll see as that's rolled out across the country, but certainly piloted in Tayside. We'll see a real benefit of that, particularly for domestic victims, to help them with future, with what comes out in court, if it even gets to court, because of what's seen on the footage. And that was really it. Sorry, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Jamie. And I should welcome you to your first attendance of this committee as a new area commander. You're very welcome, and we look forward to working with you going forward.
Thanks very much. Yeah, Kevin's done a great job, helped me out, made it easy for me to come in today. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think Jennifer Middlemiss, do you want to make a comment on this?
Hi, it was just Councillor Mayor, you had mentioned on the elderly population, quite strange. We were just speaking about that again the other day. One of our new partners that I've asked to engage with us is the local dementia centre in George Street that's newly opened. A lot of money has been invested in that particular area of work. They're a fantastic team, so I've started meeting with them just recently because my ask to them was, look, we've never had anybody like you in our partnership before. What does that look like? Can you tell me if you've got people coming through your doors that are suffering from domestic abuse? The answer to that was right away, absolutely we do. But like what you've said, that people are frightened to report because, again, due to the nature of their illness and also due to their age. And actually they've maybe lived with it for a long time, but increasingly their medical is, their history is changing and they're having to review how they're behaving. And so again, they are moderating their behaviour, but again, there has been indications that is increasing, and we are hoping to work very closely with our colleagues there. They are a supporter now of the partnership, so we've continued to engage with them regularly to see what that kind of looks like. We're also going to be working with our colleagues in health to kind of understand that a bit better and what that looks like for our elderly population. So again, it's not something that we focused on before, but I can reassure you that we're starting to look at that again across the piece. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me? Sorry, I'll say that again if I can remember exactly what I said there. I want to thank Detective Inspector Kevin Mollison for his presentation here today, and would ask if he could send us a copy of the presentation so we could share it with the committee. Thank you.
No, and thank everybody. Thank you all for your time today and allowing me to present to yourselves. And thank you all for your questions as well. It's been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is paper on in relation to the 16 days of activism for 2025. And can I ask Jennifer Middlemiss, the Violence Against Women Partnership Coordinator, to introduce the report and deliver the presentation. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Can I have the first slide, please? I know we're singing. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me along today. Today I'm here to talk about the 16 Days of Activism campaign. Next slide, please. Oh, that's fine, that slide. Our international campaign runs from the 25th to the 10th of December for the elimination of violence against women, to raise awareness and promote action against violence against women and girls globally. Our local campaign this year is focused on hope, #hope. We started our campaign on Thursday evening with working with our supporters, Perth Film Society. There was over 110 people sitting watching this film, and it was called Small Things Like These. Both myself and Scilla Taylor, the Perthshire Women's Aid manager, presented at the beginning to talk a little bit about the film. The film itself was focused on trauma and the impact on vicarious trauma in people's lives. Being that the film was called Small Things Like These, what it is about is making small changes can make a huge difference. The national theme this year is All Together to Prevent and End Violence Against Women and Girls. Locally, that's the reason why we chose hope. What do you hope for in relation to violence against women and girls? We used this at our pre-launch on Friday, where we had our First Minister who helped officially launch our campaign. We encouraged people and all our supporters, people who were attending, to use pledge cards to look at what they can do in terms of hope. Next slide, please. Officially, as I said, it starts on the 25th of November, so we were lucky to start a little bit early to have our campaign. However, yesterday we had our Sir Optimus ladies who stood to do a silent vigil at Perth High Street at 11 o'clock. That went really, really well. Again, a lot of people were coming and going and asking questions, which was really helpful as well. Why were they there? What were they there for? Can't miss them because they all stand in orange. So yeah, it's very representative of what they do to try and eradicate violence against women and girls. We then moved on to our session, which was round in the gallery, which was a wellbeing session. And again, that was focusing on hope, which was looking at ideas and included healing through art and other natural creative activities supported by our colleagues within Perthshire Countryside Trust. We then had, to start off actually, we had a story from Scilla, who is our manager at Perthshire Women's Aid, who talked about healing. Scilla herself was a victim of domestic abuse over 12 years ago, so she has a story that she told yesterday to her members who were there. We then finished off that session with meditation, and that was delivered by our lovely Lady Violet. Next slide, please. I was up yesterday morning setting up the exhibition. We're just about to kick off our exhibition today. This is a What Were You Wearing Survivor exhibition, and our hosts this year are Perth UHI. This will run from the 26th to the 28th of November of this week. Since 2014, this exhibition has been installed in thousands of campuses across the world, and it was hosted originally by the University of Kansas. So that's where we got this model from. It's a very thought-provoking display, and it challenges one of the society's most harmful rape myths, that clothing can be responsible for sexual violence. The truth is clear: the only person at fault is the perpetrator. This is based on real-life stories, often a stark reminder on the impact of victims. Next slide, please. I finish off, so I'm going up to that just shortly after I finish here. And then I finish off this afternoon. We are putting on a little training session on domestic abuse. Again, that's just an opportunity, so we get practitioners around the table to understand and learn more around domestic abuse, and it's supported by our colleagues within Bernardo's. Next slide, please. Tomorrow we are hosting a seminar, which is a morning session on the homicide timeline. I'll speak about that more in a minute, but the homicide timeline tomorrow we have, it's Professor Jane Monckton-Smith, she'll presenting that for us. The homicide timeline is a framework for understanding the risk and the escalation patterns in intimate partner relationships where coercive control and stalking are present. This timeline represents a typical journey identified in research, which explains how and why risk may be escalating. This particular session we thought was quite good to put on because it's designed for professionals who respond to disclosure of domestic abuse on stalking and those who manage offenders. It then goes into a bit more detail of what does coercive control, what they are and stalking are, what the patterns might look like. The training also focuses on the perpetrator's thinkings and motivations behind that. The session is designed to give a brief introduction and overview to the timeline. And as I've already highlighted, it's presented by Professor Jane Monckton-Smith and our team. And it really allows us to look at also the research that's been done on the homicide timeline and provides expertise on coercive control. Next slide, please. On Tuesday, we will pop along to RASAC are opening their doors to do this every year for us. So we've got just a little networking lunch that's open to the public and everyone to attend at a lunchtime session to just go in and pop in and see what they're up to, how they deliver their services at a local level in Perth and Kinross. Next slide. Every year we put on Reclaim the Night. This year it's happening on Wednesday the 3rd of December. We'll be leaving from here to High Street. Reclaim the Night originated way back in the 70s. The march took place around the UK in response to women being affected, being told not to go out at night around the time of the murders committed by the Yorkshire Ripper. The marchers represent the strong messaging that women should be able to walk anywhere and not be blamed or restricted due to the impact of male violence. Whilst the reality remains that women are most at risk from someone they know in their own home, this does not eradicate a risk on the streets. So again, last year when we it's been put on for years and years in Perth and Kinross, but last year when we put it on, there was probably about 350 people and a lot of you here today who also attended, so thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide, sorry, thank you. We have our first seminar, which I've highlighted on homicide. Now, just to give you a little bit of context around homicide, the Scottish Government are starting to introduce a new domestic homicide review and suicide review, and the Scottish model will be built on core principles. The Criminal Justice Modernisation and Abusive Domestic Review Bill was introduced by Scottish Parliament on 24th of September 2024. The bill is a dual-purpose bill which provisions within Part 2 of the statutory framework for what will be Scotland's national multi-agency domestic homicide and suicide review model. Further details on the bill and what stage it's at is coming fairly soon, so we'll be able to share that as we see fit. However, it was felt appropriate that we put on 2 sessions on homicide this year because, again, the new bill has been implemented. We have called this Facing the Truth and Finding Hope. This, again, will build on the event of the homicide timeline and will feature presentations around the review. Quite significant, our guest speakers, Dr. Marcia Scott, who is a feminist activist, a researcher and practitioner. She has advocated and volunteered and researched work in gender-based violence in sectors around the world for the past 30 years. We also at that session have Jessica, who is the head of Scotland for Safe Lives. Safe Lives are a UK charity dedicated to ending domestic abuse for good. They combine work from services, our survivors, statistics to support people to become safe, well and rebuild their lives. Since 2005, Safe Lives have worked with organisations across the UK to transform the response to domestic abuse, with over 60,000 victims at high risk of murder or serious harm now receiving coordinated support annually. Fiona Duart, she is an MB. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Scottish charity Emily's Test. At 18 years of age, her daughter Emily took her own life after being subjected to a relentless campaign of physical, psychological and sexual abuse by a fellow student while living and studying at university. Emily's tragic death was the result of a series of failures. Since Emily's Test has been successfully campaigning to raise awareness of gender-based violence and stimulate change both within policy, professional, practice, intervention and making sure we have the right support in Scottish education. Working closely with Scottish Government, Fiona Duart, she does universities, college, colleagues in Police Scotland. Fiona continues to guide the sector towards safer campuses for all to work so that students can live, work and study. So that gives you a wee quick whirlwind of what we're putting on for the homicide timeline. Fiona herself actually approached me not so long ago, and we're currently working with our colleagues at Perth UHI to see if we can bring in this model locally. Next slide, please. Again, another session we're putting on next week, on the 8th, that is focusing on trauma-informed practice with our colleagues at RASAC. We put this on every year as well. So again, it's just another session to help practitioners learn more on how they deliver informed practices within their own work streams. Next slide, please. On Tuesday the 9th, we have our friends at Perthshire Women's Aid who are putting on a Taste of Hope celebrating women over tea and cake. But what I can say, it's not just a case of having a coffee morning. We're bringing survivors of those affected by domestic abuse along to that session, who will bring along, and they are going to be involved in doing poetry, and a couple of art displays are going to be put on by some of the survivors as well. And just about, again, celebrating women who have taken that journey and that step to try and to support them through that journey. So again, it's a really good thing to put on for women. And this wasn't in the overall programme, so this is just a new addition that we've put on recently. For those of you who haven't seen it, we've decided that we're actually, a few months ago we met to do our violence against women strategy, and we've decided now, why not? If not, let's do it as part of our 16 days and let's go out with a bang, so to speak. We'll be launching that on our new strategy on the 10th of December, and that falls on Human Rights Day. Human Rights Day is a meaningful, but that was a deliberate choice actually, that we actually chose that day. Human Rights Day allows us to reaffirm a centred principle that underpins our work. A woman's right is a human right. This year's theme centres on hope, which aligns perfectly with the direction of our strategy. Hope is more than a feeling, it's a call to action. It reflects our belief that change is possible, that inequality can be challenged, and that women and girls can be empowered when their rights are recognised, they're respected and they're protected. By launching on Human Rights Day, we are placing our strategy within an international framework of dignity, equality and justice. It sends a clear message that our work here in Perth and Kinross is connected to global efforts to end discrimination, reduce poverty and amplify the voices of women and girls. Our strategy focuses on addressing the systematic barriers that hold women back, particularly those linked to poverty and inequality, while offering practical ways to inspire hope in real and tangible ways. Through advocacy, our partnerships, education and community action, we are committing to a future where women and girls have genuine opportunities to thrive. Next slide, please. And just to finish off, really, that's our logo for this year, and that absolutely represents Perth and Kinross to a T. It also represents the partnership really, really well. It's one big hug. We are a family, we listen and we care. That's why we do 16 days. We don't really need to be 16 days as a campaign over 2 weeks, but that's not the message here. The message is very clear. Violence against women and girls happens 365 days a year, and we at the partnership are committed to endeavour to make that change we want to achieve better outcomes for women and girls, and like our national campaign, together we can end and will prevent violence against women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Does anyone have any questions for Jennifer? Councillor Forbes? Oh.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, for outlining all the good work that you and your colleagues are doing. My question's actually about an answer you gave when the police were online, and I was hoping you could clarify this for me, because I really hope I either misheard you or misunderstood what you said, but I think you said 80% of women are at risk. Is that really the case, or have I got that wrong?
86% is the figures that tell us that the focus is on women and girls. Absolutely, it's really high. So that's why our focus has to be around that. That is the Scottish figures, you know. So again, UK figures I don't have to hand, but that was the most recent figures that we received to tell us.
Okay, I'm absolutely, have to say, gobsmacked. So are you saying that 86% of women in Scotland are at risk of domestic violence?
86% of it is what we have. No, absolutely not. That's not. I'll need to go back to that.
I think Jennifer.
Yeah, absolutely not the population. Sorry, I wasn't very clear about that. Just before you fall off your seat. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Oh, Councillor Braun, are you?
Thank you for asking me. I was hesitating to ask this question up after I heard it was 80%, but I really wanted to follow on from what I was asking the police. And I mean, first of all, thank you for the presentation, and I fully support you. And look, I was just looking at paragraph 4.2 in the report, which is fully support all the items and the bullet points in there, and that will come as no surprise, I think, for this committee if I say bullet point 4, I very much support. But the thing I was trying to raise with the police was the fact that the 16 days of activism obviously highlights what's happening, and it's a terrible thing, and it's a worry that it's becoming socially acceptable in some ways, that violence can be perpetrated against women. And I don't know why it's suddenly coming that way, whether it's a drink or drugs or anything else, I have no idea. But the point I was trying to make across was my only little concern sometimes is that these things give this impression that all men are abusers, potential abusers. And the point I was trying to make is that the good majority of men don't commit violence against women, nor are they potentially people who commit violence against women. And I wonder sometimes there's never a caveat that says, I suppose at the end of the day, don't have nightmares. You're walking past men in the street, they're not all abusers. Using the Western vernacular, I suppose I spoke to people at Rassack in the past. Most men still wear a white hat, spiritually, I suppose. That's the concern, I think, that sometimes it's image that all men are abusers. That's my only worry. It never gets across that, it is a minority. Just want to give your thoughts on that.
It's not about victim blaming. We absolutely don't go about, in our agencies work whilst we're working with women and girls. Again, numbers do suggest that the highest level of incidents reported to the perpetrator happens to be a male. So that's what we have to do and support interventions via that, and make sure we have the appropriate support in place for our victims. Again, it's not about going about saying all men are bad, like you've highlighted there. We certainly don't do that. And as a partnership, we do our best to make sure we're very inclusive and include men in part of the decision making. It's not about that. It's about bringing people with us and making sure everyone is part of that. And it's certainly not about victim blaming. We do our best to try and avoid that. And I think if I take the partnership back, not that I was on it, but back in the day, I think many moons ago, it was very much men shouldn't be included, and I think things have moved really, really quickly in terms of how we do that and make sure that it isn't, everyone plays a part in that.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, do you wish to come in here?
Thank you, Vice Chair. So just for clarification for members today, the Scottish Crime and Justice Survey suggests 1 in 5 women experience partner abuse in their lifetime, and some of which will be underreported as well. And there's a 65% repeat victimisation of that 1 in 5 as well.
Thank you, Aaron. And I think you mentioned, Bob, or maybe I misheard you, that it's becoming almost normalised. I think it's always been normalised, but what the interventions that are taking place now in the raising of awareness is taking away some of that normalisation. And actually, to a large extent, the solution lies very much with all of us, not just women protecting each other, but also for men understanding what the issues are and what constitutes this. So I think it's very useful to have these conversations, and these questions are very welcome because it helps generate the conversation and the awareness. So thank you. Councillor John Duff, please.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thanks very much for the presentation this morning. Just an observation, first and foremost, if I may. The date of the launch of your strategy on the 10th of December unfortunately coincides with the meeting of council. So councillors unfortunately will be unable to attend, I would imagine. So apologies from all of us for that. In paragraph 4.1 in the report, it talks about advocating for policy change and calling for improved laws and services. And I just wondered if you could give us an idea of where the services within Perth and Kinross could be improved in order to protect women and girls from violence. If there were specific, policy changes or support that was needed that would help this situation. Thank you.
There's quite a number of things that could help. Obviously, a lot of our services that are specialised services that are delivering violence against women and girls, particularly Perthshire Women's Aid and RASAC, unfortunately, just again, it all boils back to finance and how we can deliver services across Perth and Kinross. The Deliver an Equally Safe model, which is obviously Scottish Government level, that is now on an annual basis. So we are still waiting pending again, and that will have no influence at a local level either. But again, the bigger picture at broader Scottish Government level, we're waiting to see what happens next year. That definitely would help mainstream a lot. The fact that, because again, it's on an annual, so again, all the services have to wait, working with delivering services till the end of March, and we don't know what goes beyond that. A lot of how the services do, however, they don't just rely on delivering equally safe. So again, where there's gaps and there's challenges, like what I mentioned earlier, if we're seeing a rise in older people, if we're seeing a rise in learning disabilities, then we would look at that and ask ourselves, what are the challenges, where are the gaps here, how can we improve services? We're quite lucky at the partnership because we already have a locally delivered, we have an action plan and a delivery improvement plan where again we follow the equally safe strategy, so we're governed by that. So that is our scrutiny. So we need to make sure that me as a coordinator, as lead officer, and my colleagues within the partnership, we have to make sure that we are maintaining these standards. We also follow an equally safe standard framework as well. And I think Perth and Kinross, we scored 96%, so we're doing no bad, if I could say that, which was fine. And again, there's a wee bit of a lull this year. They've not asked us for that as yet, but I'm confident that whilst there'll always be gaps, but all we can do as a partnership is identify what they are, and they're so wide, so there's such a variation. We just need to take small steps because that can't happen. Change can't happen overnight. We need to begin at the basic and say what can we do with that particular area of business and how can we improve that, because small steps make a difference, like what I mentioned earlier. We can't overwhelm everybody. Finance plays a huge part, as you would know, in your role. So yeah, I'm not sure that's answered your question, but hopefully that gives you a wee bit of a flavour. Oh.
No, thanks for that. We are coming up to budget time, so give us food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff, and like you, I'll also be at full council, so I'm not able to attend that session. And equally, the session on Facing the Truth and Finding Hope with Dr. Marsha Scott, I'm disappointed I won't be able to attend that. But having worked with Dr. Scott in the past, she's a very knowledgeable and impressive advocate, promoting all steps to be taken against violence against women and girls. So if any of you are available, including all of our male colleagues, it's not just for the women, as I said before, please try and attend. I think you'd find it very worthwhile. So now can I call on Bailey Michael Williamson, please, to ask your question?
Certainly, is it not Peter Barrett before me?
No.
Okay, Jennifer, I think you're doing some outstanding work and raising the profile of violence against women and domestic abuse. But I was just wondering if you could just highlight some of the ways you're thinking of expanding the scheme into more rural areas of Perth and Kinross.
Thanks, Councillor Williamson. We have this discussion quite regularly and quite a lot of what I can do or what the partnership can do to look at working alongside yourself and your communities in a rural locality. We are doing well. Again, it's about planning. So again, we need to embed that into next year's. As you know, we tried a couple of things over the last 3 years in Aberfeldy, Pitlochry, and again, we need to just generically look at what the footfall would look like long term. So again, because we've had that discussion, we are going to start engaging with local businesses and enterprises and other areas and community councils to see, as you know, I've got a meeting coming up with the community council that you set me up with. So again, I'm looking to see whether or not what we could put on across all the areas. And again, that fits in quite neatly to the public protection agenda too, because it's not just about violence against women and girls, it's about all the public protection services that we cover across Perth and Kinross. I often talk about taking a bus out. It sounds ridiculous, but you know, taking a bus to these areas, talking about us getting people coming in to see us, going out. You know, sometimes night meetings don't always work because people don't want to come to them for whatever reason. So again, it's about us engaging with the public and asking what they want. So again, I can come back to you on that, Councillor Williamson, and we'll discuss that further, and we'll put a wee plan together and see how we can work for next year. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. And tell me, are you also looking at maybe doing some form of scheme about walking in their shoes or walk a mile in their shoes? I think that's been successfully rolled out across the UK, and I was just wondering if you've investigated that and see if there's something we could do within Perth and Kinross.
Yeah, I've spoken to our colleagues, and there's quite a number of campaigns coming out just now. So, but that's one of them. And I've spoken to our colleagues in Perthshire Women's Aid to see if that would be a goer for us for looking to develop next year. So yeah, again, if you could leave that with me, and I will come back to you with further information. It's not started, or we've kind of commenced the discussions, and we'll see what comes of that next year. But yeah, we absolutely would be up for looking at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions or last minute questions in the chat, so I will now move the report. I'm pleased to move this report, which acknowledges the work of the Violence Against Women Partnership in developing the programme of events for the 16 days of activism in Perth and Kinross. I request the committee to reiterate commitment to the equally safe strategy and the eradication of violence against women and girls. I'm happy to accept the recommendations and move the report for noting. Can I ask Councillor McEwen to second the report, please? Testing.
And I think that the hard work that you and your team have done working with the third sector has created a real core event that other events going forward can be acted around. I think that awareness is the most important thing that we do here, and it's not just awareness for men, it's awareness for everything. But for me, I think it's awareness to men. It's about education, that violence against women and girls isn't necessarily domestic violence. It can be just inappropriate behaviour, inappropriate touching in a public space. We don't have an underground system like other big cities in the UK do, but there are plenty of stories about women saying any woman who's been on the underground in London has been touched up. That's violence against women and girls. That's inappropriate and needs called out. We need to reduce the incidence of these, and that's the whole purpose of having these events. I think, as Councillor Braun said, there are good men out there, and I think it's a responsibility of good men to call this out. I think Not Be That Guy campaign that the police launched in that video is extremely powerful and a really good way of constantly showing, and it's always available on YouTube to be shown and rewatched. I think that's a good thing. From a woman's point of view, I think all women feel that they're at risk. So I was dancing around numbers about who feels at risk. The impression I get from discussion through this topic as part of the work that we do here as councillors, that all women feel at risk of violence at some point in their life. I think the Reclaim the Night March that we're all invited to go on demonstrates that just walking the streets by yourself results in being fearful, and that should not be the case. And I think that's one of the most important messages that we have, and I think it'd be an important thing for as many councillors as possible to attend the march next week, because I think that is a very powerful message to say that even lower level violence and aggression is not acceptable within our society. So thank you.
Hello. Thank you. Just working. Thank you, Councillor McEwen. And I have a couple of members wishing to make comment on the report. Can I call on Councillor Carol Mayer first, please?
Thank you, Vice Convener. My comments were based on something that Jennifer said that just triggered me, and actually a lot of the things that I was going to say have now been covered by the convener, but I'm going to carry on and make my comment anyway. It was actually Councillor Forbes' question and the answer that he received from Jennifer that made me think about this. Councillor Forbes questioned the statistic of 80% or 86%, whatever it was, of women being at risk of domestic violence. And then Jennifer clarified what the statistic actually was. And I wasn't listening really to what her answer was, because what I was thinking was, why didn't I think 80% was too high a percentage? And I'll tell you why. And I am not, this isn't an axe to grind against Angus or anybody else. The reason I didn't question that statistic was because that statistic to a woman seems 100% reasonable. Yeah, all the gender behaviour towards women, it doesn't always have to be outright violence, for 16 days of violence against women and girls is encompassing all those unwanted behaviours, touching, bullying, etc., coercion, it's all those things. And as a woman, it seems to me highly likely that every woman and girl at some point in their life will have experienced behaviours like this, whether it was outright violence, whether it was unwanted sexual attention, whether it was sexual bullying, whether, anything, and from a wide range of perpetrators. The only thing being in common is that the perpetrators were all male. While I was reading the papers for this committee last night, and I was just thinking back over, I'm nearly 70, and I've had a lot of conversations with my friends and women and family members over the years. And whenever this subject has raised itself into the conversation, whether it was because we were actually talking about it or whether just an anecdote was being shared or whatever, I don't think I have got a single woman friend, co-worker or family member who has not at some point in her life suffered various forms of abuse, which is either actual violence or, you know, sexually based abuse. And when I tried to make a list of things in my own life while reading the paper, I came up with, and then stopped because it was getting distressing, at least 10 instances of from when I was a little girl until now as an older woman, where I have experienced behaviours from the mildest range of what you might call unwanted flirting up to the very most serious harm, which I would not care to share with anybody. And it just seems to me that this is so common to women, and we all know it happens, and yet men don't have that full understanding of how many women suffer every day in various ways. So my comment would be, every one of our male colleagues in this committee today, I would really like to ask you, go away and speak to the women in your life and ask them, is this true? Have you got this same experience? Do your friends have this experience? And just maybe get a bigger picture of how widespread this behaviour is. And Jennifer is doing amazing work here, and I would just like to say thank you so much for this presentation, because although it's not an unknown subject to me, it certainly pressed buttons that I hadn't pressed for a little while, and I'm very grateful for her for the work that she's doing on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor. And can I now call upon Councillor Peter Barrett, please?
I now wish that had gone in before Carol, because that's a difficult speech to follow, but obviously very heartfelt and I think an important contribution to the discussion today. I think it was good to attend the successful launch of the 16 days of activism against, or the pre-launch, Jennifer, of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence against women and girls last Friday. And to see once again in this report such a packed and impactful programme arranged by the organisers. So I want to congratulate them once again on that and their record, but also to single out Jennifer for her key role in that. And I want to extend that thanks to our partners in the third and voluntary sectors, the Sir Optimists, Perthshire Women's Aid and RASAC, the Council's housing and social work teams, community resilience and safety teams, and the police, obviously, for their effective collaboration and the work that they do to prevent violence and against women and girls locally and contribute towards nationally as well, because I know we make a telling contribution in that arena too, to make Perth and Kinross a place where women are safe to go about their lives free from gender-based violence. I've heard Fiona Duart speak to council leaders at COSLA, and that's another hugely impactful story of her daughter Emily's tragic suffering and endurance of abuse and controlling behaviour, ultimately resulting in her death. And I think if there are still spaces available to that, I would recommend that members get along to that. Also, last year I found the What You Were Wearing exhibition and the women survivor stories particularly powerful and disturbing, and would again encourage all members to get along to that tomorrow at UHI Library. And as the convener said, join the Reclaim the Night March, which will take place in Perth City Centre next Wednesday, to demonstrate our solidarity with women and their right to walk the streets at night in safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. And I would just like to say that both the comments from Councillor Ware and Councillor Barrett, I wholeheartedly not only recognise but agree with, and thank you both for your comments in this report. If there are no amendments, can we agree the recommendations as set out in the report, please?
Agreed.
Now we'll see if this works. Oh, yeah, this time round. I'd just like to thank everybody for their contributions. I think everybody's life experience in this is really, really important. Of course, we all have different life experiences, but it all plays into the narrative of how life is out there and how we represent our communities. So well done, everybody, for that was said. Thank you very much. I'm going to take a 5-minute recess now. We'll restart back just after 11 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll now move to item 7 on our agenda, which is a Mission Share Service update on progress and the next steps. This paper will also go this afternoon to the Finance and Resources Committee as well. And I think we have a short video to play at the beginning. Here we go. Thank you very much for that video. Right, today we have both Kirsty Stevens, the Principal Officer for Environmental Health, and Kayleigh Campbell, the Missing Shares Officer, here to answer any questions. So if people could put in the chat if you have any questions. So is that Councillor Forbes, yes?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I really appreciate that video. Actually, that was really helpful. I wasn't on the committee when this started, so I didn't really know the background and what this was all about. So, just for my own clarity, would this cover, say, for example, there was a block of flats that needed a new roof, and 1 or 2 people in the block were refusing to pay their share? Would the council come along and step in, and do we actually pay the money and then try and claim it back, or do we just provide support and advice to the other owners as to how to get the owner that won't get involved to pay their share?
So I think the most accurate answer is all of that. So quite often there are owners who manage to complete the works themselves with just support to identify and contact the other owners in the building. But quite often there are a minority of owners who either aren't contactable for whatever reason, maybe they're abroad or just not communicating with the other owners, or owners who appreciate their responsibility and
want to engage with getting the works done but aren't in a financial position to be able to pay their full share. So we help support through the whole organisation process, communication with the other owners, and where there are any owners that can't or won't pay, they make an application for PKC to pay those shares, and we then recover it from those owners, primarily by a repayment notice, which is registered against the title deeds for the property, which secures the debt. And then the owners who are engaging with the process set up a repayment plan so that they can pay that back over time.
Thanks. That was a really clear explanation and brief. So thank you for that. So in terms of the financial risk to the council, are we ever exposed to not getting the money back, or is it always tied to the house, and therefore when the house is sold we were guaranteed to get our money back?
Yeah, it's always secured against the property. So sometimes it might be a while before the property sells, but when the property does sell, it's recovered at that stage.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bone, for your questions.
Thanks, Commander. Do you want me to split these and just do them together? Okay. Come back to this. First question was, do we have an upper limit of commitment of funds for this? I mean, at the moment, I think the figure in this quoting is about 507,000, which is potentially necessary. Do we have a limit to which we won't go above that or commit ourselves to?
So when we introduced the service, the bracket that we put on our policy for shares was 500 to 10,000, but that has had to be exceeded several times in order to support the works, which is why we have suggested the increase in the cost bracket that we've put in the report, because we're starting to see much more comprehensive works that have a much larger share. It's highlighted actually the scale of the works that's needed and how much support the owners need. So for the most part, the applications that come in do fall within the original limit, but there are regular applications for larger amounts than that.
And my second question follows on from Councillor Forbes, and this to do with the fact that we're taking a charge on the property, and sometimes it will rely on the sale to get the money back. Now, I would suspect most of the properties are mortgaged, therefore there's a first charge on the property anyway, and we're obviously taking on a second charge. When we're looking at allocation of 10,000, risk is reasonable that we'd get our money back as and when it's sold. But if we're talking about going up to 30,000 now as a possible max, and that's the second charge on a property, there's an increased risk now that sale proceeds won't cover both the first mortgage and ours. So are we taking that into account, that there's an element, a higher element of risk there for the extra money?
Yeah, that's taken into account through the application review process. So that is reviewed by myself, the Principal Officer for Environmental Health, a member of our legal team and finance, who all have information about the value of the property as sold, so whatever value's on the title deeds, how long they've had that property for, if there's a mortgage on there, and that's all weighed against the potential public health risks to the wider public if it's in a lot of the tenement buildings are right up on pavements in Perth City Centre, so deterioration of the building could pose quite significant public health risk. So sometimes there is a slight monetary risk against the value of the missing share and the value of the property, but it's weighted against the other potential public health risks.
Thank you very much. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Convener. My question relates to 4.2 4.1 of the report, where it says the service receives an average of 50 to 70 inquiries per year. However, the rising cost of applications indicates that the funding required for missing shares is likely to increase significantly over the next 2 to 3 years. I just wonder if it's possible to be a bit more specific, as sort of significantly increase significantly is something of a sort of nebulous term. Is it possible to be more specific in terms of a figure or a percentage of how much that increase is likely to be? Thank you.
Yeah, so the best way to do that is probably to give you examples of the planned works we're starting to see that are likely to make applications over the next couple of years. The average cost of full building works, where I'm currently assisting owners who have had a survey done or works that have previously been completed, is around about £300,000, because the buildings are starting to see failing of temporary repairs that have been completed over the past couple of decades. Where owners haven't been able to get in touch with everyone in the building to do a full building survey or to do more comprehensive repairs. All they've been able financially to do is some patch repairs to fix some flashing on a roof or replace a couple of tiles or a quick bit of cement here and there to stop water coming in. These are all starting to fail, which means that the cost of the repair is much, much larger. So over the next 2 to 3 years, we estimated £300,000 to £500,000 is likely to be the cost, although it's difficult to nail down because of applications coming in and when the works are completed, but that's the ballpark figure we're working on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Convener. Just a quick overall statement. This is a fantastic programme, and you know, I'm pleased to see it's progressing so well. And I think ultimately a lot of that is to the drive of Kaylee and the knowledge and experience she's built up in this sector. So that's to be applauded. I guess my question is associated with who we are and how we are supporting tenants to actually choose contractors, because a lot of these buildings are quite sensitive, and are we starting to build up a kind of pool of trusted contractors that can work on these buildings, and therefore we're additionally signposting the appropriate types of repairs for both quality and good value. Thank you.
We do. Fortunately, we're very lucky in Perth and Kinross to have Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust, who I work with regularly to support owners to repair their buildings. Due to their requirements for their grant provision, owners need to use conservation accredited contractors and surveyors, as well as the requirements for a lot of the buildings, particularly in Perth City Centre, which are listed buildings. Those are requirements, so there are a lot in Perth and Kinross who have done several works that have been supported by Missing Chairs and by Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust. So I do work a lot with Heritage Trust and rely on their experience with professionals in the field locally to make sure that it's the best people who know the materials used locally and how to best repair and support those buildings. So Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust are a fantastic resource to make sure that that's done right.
Ideal. That's a very reassuring to hear, and I think that's you know, absolutely critical to really sort of building the service going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. Thanks, Kaylee, for the report and for the great work you're doing in this area. On Appendix 1 in your report, there's a table there which shows the amounts recovered, 22%, payment plan in progress, 51%. The remaining 27% is under the title of secured debt, which I presume means it's secured against the final or the eventual sale of the property. Given that that could be some number of years down the line, do we continue to apply some kind of interest rate charge to that as the years pass, so that the £20,000 that we're due today isn't going to be worth £20,000 in 20 years' time. Do we increase that amount as the years pass in terms of eventual recovery? Thank you.
We decided not to go with the option of using an interest charge because we have one process that we use whether owners are applying for support because they want to be able to contribute and want help to do that, or because the owners aren't engaging with the process. It's just one procedure that we use. So we felt that it wouldn't be in the best interest of the owners who are trying to do the right thing to apply interest and to have an increase in charge over time, because for some of the owners who are engaging, the cost of their share means that they have to take an extended repayment period, which would in the end mean that they pay quite a bit more than their share. So for that reason, it's not applied to the owners who have it secured only and don't have a repayment plan either, because it's just one process for both.
Thank you very much. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, my question is in relation to 4.5, where it states in the report that efforts are being made to promote proactive building maintenance, helping owners avoid large-scale repairs and associated costs, which can be prohibitive to owners. I welcome that, but it would be helpful to have just a little bit more around how that is being done and is it being effective. I mean, previously having owned properties in shared buildings with shared ownership, that is the first stage of the proactiveness in keeping the building healthy. So if you had any more information around that, that would be helpful to understand. Thank you.
Absolutely. So since the service was introduced, we have done several information events for owners in tenement buildings, for landlords specifically, and for councillors as well. We did some building condition walks around Perth city centre so that owners could see firsthand some of the damage that can happen to a building when it's neglected. We've also worked with Under One Roof to deliver information sessions about how to maintain your tenement buildings, and they have such a massive wealth of information on how to follow all of the processes necessary to do that. We're also exploring other funding options that we have, and one of the projects that we would like to get on its feet over the next year or two is to support owners to do building surveys and to organise a regular maintenance schedule for their buildings so that if anything comes up, they can deal with it before it becomes a big costly issue.
That's brilliant, thank you. Even a simple thing like making sure gutters and downpipes run.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barrett.
And thanks, convener. It was really just following on from the questions from Councillor Forbes and Duff, and with regard to paragraph 4.9. I'm assuming that the kind of option of last resort is the order being taken on the property and no repayment until that property's sold. But in terms of extended payment processes, what options does the council offer for staged repayments or payments on an opportunistic basis or whatever?
Payment period for missing shares is 5 years, but owners can request to have that extended to up to 30 years because that's what's laid out in the legislation. So where owners have engaged with the process and I can let them know early on what their repayment amount is going to be, I'll talk through the options with them on what that's going to look like per month. So we'll start with what the standard 5-year would be. I'll let them know what that monthly repayment would look like, and then we'll have a conversation about what they're able to pay per month. So we'll negotiate it between us to find out what's the best option for them. But throughout the repayment process, they can fluctuate that as and when needed. So as long as, to begin with, they have the approval to extend it over the maximum amount of time they think they'll need. If their financial circumstances change at any time within that period, they can make additional repayments or increase their regular repayment amount. So the whole repayment process is flexible so that the owners can manage it in whatever way works best for them.
Bailey McLaren, do you have a second question?
Thank you again, convener. Yeah, my question is about this repayment, but it's actually about the efficiency of. I'm aware of an example which is actually out with Perth and Kinross Council, but with another council, a larger council. A person has sold a property and they can't access all their capital out of the sale of their property because the council have not attributed the monies that's required to repay. They haven't calculated their invoices from a contractor, and this is now 12 months on, and that person is now unable to proceed to another house purchase. Their capital is sitting in an account, their lawyer's cash account, because they're aware they're due money. So I am asking, how proactive are we ensuring that when the money's come forward, that's concluded in a timely manner, and we don't preclude somebody from moving on to another property, so the other side of the fence?
So from what I think I understand from what you said, they haven't put the repayment notice on because they've not calculated the amount at that stage. Is that right? Okay.
So the seller's aware they're due money. They're waiting to repay it. They can't. But the impact of that is, so are we being efficient in knowing who is due? I'm trying to ensure that that doesn't happen to some other people that we're dealing with here. Thank you.
Okay, so that blows my mind a little bit, to be honest. I'm so involved with most of the projects that we support that throughout the whole process, as invoices are coming in, I've got them added to a spreadsheet. I have all of the calculations and how that's apportioned, which is sometimes not easy. And by the time the works are finished, if all the invoices have been produced throughout that process, we have that apportionment ready. And unless I'm 100% certain that that is the final amounts and the final apportionments, there's no hold put on the titles. So because of the length of the time of the works, there's always going to be a risk that it will sell mid-works, which has happened a couple of times, but usually the seller will make the buyer aware, and there's private agreements to resolve any issues that come up in that process. But generally speaking, for most projects, as all of the invoices come in, I'm adding them to a spreadsheet, making sure all the calculations are correct, and it's not until I'm 100% sure of that the repayment notice is registered against the property. But because I'm involved all the way through the process, it means that I have all that information all the way through, so it doesn't take long to register, and then that's the final amount. There's no question at that point.
So thank you. Yes, we are on top of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I was struck by the comment in section 4.3, paragraph 4.3. I was just wondering what proportion of the work is in Perth and how much is out with Perth, because the reference there says that they've also been delivered in Crieff and Muth, but I wasn't sure, is it like 98 are done in Perth and 2 out with Perth, or what's the proportions?
So it is the majority that are in Perth city centre, because the majority of the tenement buildings are in Perth city centre. So Missing Shares only supports buildings that consist of 3 or more properties. And there are several tenement buildings out with Perth City Centre. So as we've said, we've supported in Blairgowrie, in Crieff, Aberfeldy, Muthill. But because the majority of the buildings are in Perth City Centre, that's where most of the help comes from. What I've also found is a lot of the support that's been provided in the towns and villages outside of Perth is that there's quite a lot of community in those areas, and people know people, and once they find out who owns the other property, they know who they are, so they'll have a chat, and it's a much less formal process that happens in a lot of the smaller places. But all of areas of Perth and Kinross are supported by the service. It just so happens the majority fall where the majority of tenement buildings are.
It just prompts the question whether we should be looking at extending this to just two property, whether there's two properties in a unit rather than more than three. Just maybe that would help outside Perth.
That has been discussed. There have been one or two that have come up that are two building properties, and it is possible to support, but only where both owners in the building are on board. So if we had a flat above a shop, for example, both owners are engaging, agree with the repairs, but one of the owners isn't able to afford, then there's a possibility for Missing Shares to be able to support. But in order to meet the requirements for an application, there has to be a majority in favour of the quotes. So where there are only two owners, the majority has to be two. And then there has to be a majority of the cost of the shares paid, which means that both owners would have to pay something. Whereas in a building that's made up of three properties, two owners can agree and one can not communicate or not agree and not pay, and an application is possible. So there are just, it's slightly more difficult to do in a building that's only got two properties.
Thank you very much. That's actually a point about all this I didn't know myself. Thank you for that. So, Councillor Welsh again.
Thank you, convener. The scheme is fantastic, but to an extent, it's a recognition of a lack of action in the past. I know that a number of European cities, possibly in the UK as well, proactively sort of manage their cityscape environments. Two that spring to mind is Copenhagen and I think Amsterdam. Is there an opportunity as part of the recognising the good work that has been done through Missing Shares to possibly look at how these other cities are effectively proactively managing their built up urban environments, which in actual fact may be a mechanism to then, if you like, halt a decline before it then becomes an issue around Missing Shares, because I know they do work particularly successfully, particularly in Copenhagen. There are no buildings with weeds, there are no broken gutters, and that is a function of essentially putting much more responsibility back in the building owners in real time. But if I could ask if that's possible, thank you.
Working now? Okay. I think certainly that would be a great next step for us, and we're very open-minded, I think, to consider any of these potential approaches. We're already working really strongly with other teams within the council. You know, Kayleigh runs the building condition working group, and that's been really useful to just get everybody around the table in the council that has concerns about repairs and see what tools we've got in our toolkit to best improve the situation. And I think we're gaining momentum through the Missing Shares scheme, and that would naturally lead into potentially that type of assessment, but also looking at things like the factoring side of things as well. There's a number of other areas that perhaps could also be brought together as part of a longer term improvement for the city centre, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. A couple of comments coming up later on, so I will move the paper as it sits. I am pleased to move this report, which provides a comprehensive update on the progress of the Missing Shares service. Since its launch, the service has delivered significant benefits to property owners and our wider communities, enabling vital communal repairs and supporting the preservation of our housing stock. The pilot has demonstrated clear value with over £4 million in repairs, facilitated and strong collaborative working across council services and external partners. As demand continues to grow, it is essential that we maintain the momentum and ensure the service remains fit for purpose. The recommendations proposed will help us meet the increased demand, remove financial barriers for owners, and reintroduce our commitment to fairness, wellbeing and resilience in our communities. I'm happy to accept the recommendations and move the report for approval. Can I ask Councillor McCall to second, please?
Thank you, Convener. I'm very happy to second this report, and I too wish to commend the officers on the work that they've done, not only in setting up the service, but making it so successful. I think that the 3/4 of the funding is either in the category of either being recovered or actually recovered is very impressive. And I look forward to seeing perhaps that number increasing in the future. And I'm very happy to second the report. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you for comments. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'm really interested in this, and there's absolutely no doubt, Keely, you know this stuff inside out, and thanks for answering the question so well and more importantly, so briefly. I'm always happy to get brief answers to questions, so thanks for that. I absolutely support this paper, support the recommendations in entirety, so happy to go ahead with that. As Elaine maybe knows, I own a few properties in blocks, sadly not in Perth and Kinross, because I have some first-hand experience of the problems that this can cause, and I kind of wish some other authorities did the same as we are doing here, but well done and congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Welsh.
You know, again, I just want to commend this report and absolutely support the recommendations, and again, as I mentioned before, very much applaud the efforts of Kirsty and Kaylee and their enthusiasm and passion to make a difference. I guess in the days when people are starting to be more and more concerned about AI taking jobs, this seems to me a great way to, secure employment, invest in skills, create, apprenticeships, and create that pride in Perth, which I think all councillors in this chamber, are keen to do, and improve both the visual and safety amenity of our urban city centres. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. I think this is a very good scheme. Its gestation was not without its teething problems. I seem to remember barriers being put in place by a kind of risk-averse finance team, which thankfully those were overcome. I think it's also good to see the scheme bedding in and its scope and scale growing so that it can be more effective into the future. So thanks to Kirsty and Keely for taking that forward. I think as you might have said, ultimately this is all about what the council can do to act as an enabler to improve the fabric of our buildings and the safety of the public, as well as maybe a slightly more tenuous link to homelessness prevention, but one that I think exists nonetheless. I'm also aware from the missing shares cases that my constituents have brought to me just how kind of complex and emotionally charged these issues can be when people are confronted with expensive building repairs that they have to find the money for, and particularly where the tenement title scheme appears to be unfair and unjust in how it it apportions the costs, amongst all the properties within that tenement, which sometimes, leaves people exempt from having to pay anything, and a far greater burden landing on those others. So it isn't a straightforward a scheme to administrate. It does require tact and diplomacy, and a good deal of perseverance as well. So I just want to say that I'm really pleased to see the scheme growing and support the recommendations of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. Likewise, I welcome the report and I commend very much the process and the work that is ongoing in this area. I have had the benefit of Kayleigh's assistance in Aberfeldy with an issue that's ongoing there, and I would have to say that Kayleigh's personal approach has been a major factor in the way in which the scheme is seen and taken on board. I think from the question and answers we've had today, we can see how complex an area this can be, how difficult an area it can be to coordinate and to organise. But as I say, I thank everybody for their work in this area. I think it's a great scheme, and I fully support the recommendations of the report, and hopefully it'll lead to some bigger and better things in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be happy to agree with the recommendations of the report. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 8 of our agenda, Council of Sanctuary Year 1 Annual Update. Can I ask Elaine Ritchie, Strategic Lead of Housing and Communities, to introduce this report, please?
Thank you, Convener. I'm pleased to present our first annual update as a Council of Sanctuary. Over the past year, Perth and Kinross has continued to demonstrate its commitment to welcoming, supporting and people seeking sanctuary in line with our vision of a community where everyone can live life well, free from poverty and inequality. We've made significant progress in developing a coordinated, multi-agency approach to supporting refugees and asylum seekers. Our achievements include the successful resettlement of families through various schemes, the delivery of innovative leadership and integration programmes, and the establishment of a strong community integration network. Our work has been recognised nationally, and we have benefited from sharing good practice and learning with partners across Scotland. However, we've also faced challenges, particularly around accommodation pressures and recent local protests. We've responded proactively, working closely with partners and the community to address concerns, ensure transparency and maintain a safe and welcoming environment for all. Looking ahead, our teams are focused on continuing this important work. We will build on our achievements, address ongoing challenges, and ensure that our services remain inclusive and responsive. The action plan set out in this report provides a clear framework for our next steps, and I invite members to note the contents and support the continued delivery of our Council of Sanctuary commitments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll now move to questions, and the first question is from Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I've actually got quite a lot of questions on this paper. We'll start with a really simple one, if that's okay. In 3.3, there's a link to the City of Sanctuary, and on that website, it doesn't mention Perth at all. I just wondered why that was.
This was raised recently as well, and they have limited what they've put out recently because of the protests. They haven't updated things because of that.
Is there a timeline for when they are going to update it?
I'll check with them again.
Thank you very much. Carol, is it time you want to answer your question?
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't. I think you maybe had microphone malfunctions again there, Convener. Yes, I was so impressed with this report, and I really enjoyed every page of it, and there was a lot of positive stuff getting done. And my particular question was related to the progress outlined in the report regarding the integration and wellbeing measures which are being put in place. Could you describe for us, Elaine, what impact this work has had on the local community? Thank you.
The activities that take place are designed to allow people the opportunity to integrate, to take part in everyday activities, to meet new people, to go to places in Perth that they're not been familiar with before. A lot of that work is delivered by community, third sector and faith-based groups, just to make people feel welcome, really. We recognise, though, that, as Elaine mentioned in the introduction, that there have been protests. The details are also mentioned in the committee report around the protests and some of the challenges that people have identified as a result of these. We do need to have open and honest conversations with people about these. And we have looked at how we can develop a more positive response around cohesion so that people understand the issues better, that people are talking about facts and not making things up on social media, I suppose. So yeah, we think that, or we know, we don't think, we know that the activities that are taking place are making a difference for those that are benefiting from them, and that people are meeting new people, making themselves feel more welcome in this area. As a result, I think also we've obviously got teams in the council that are providing a day-to-day response for the wider refugee community in terms of our housing resettlement team. I know Martin's here, can talk in more detail about that if needs be, but that is making a difference. People are welcome from the word go on their arrival in Perth, wherever they've come from.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to ask about working in partnership in a multi-agency approach is noted in the report. I wonder if you could explain a bit about how the council ensures the effective multi-agency collaboration, given the current challenges outlined in the report and the pressures that are facing council services. Thank you.
Again, Elaine mentioned in our introduction, the Community Integration Network. The Council has deliberately not led that Community Integration Network. It is led by the Scottish Refugee Council this year. It's a rotating chair. It was led by PCAF's Third Sector Interface last year. That Community Integration Network, though, this year has themed its agenda around the same headline themes in our Council of Sanctuary Action Plan, which is in the appendix. That has allowed more focused discussions. It has given a more focal point for the discussions to take place. It has allowed these groups to have conversations with each other about the people they're supporting. It's allowed them to speak to others, particularly just now. But one of our most recent sessions, we had our own health and safety team in the council along talking about staff safety. Because there are some concerns around in the community just now. You may have seen in the media yesterday about protests about ESOL classes in a school in Glasgow. So we obviously deliver ESOL classes here. Our ESOL provision here needs to be more aware about their own safety, about staff working there. We've heard from the Scottish Refugee Council. Clearly, the name of their organisation has made them a target for some very challenging online stuff. They've had to remove the surnames of their staff from their their email addresses. They've had to change their ways of operating in their office every day. They've had to take their staff members' pictures down off their website. So there's a lot of things within that the Community Integration Network has benefited from, that wider knowledge and sharing when they meet. The multi-agency response, the fact that it's now branded as a councillor sanctuary has kind of given that a focal point as well. It's given it a reassurance that that work is recognised, particularly the statement that was given, cross-party statement that was given by political leaders a couple of months ago when the protests started. I think that meant a lot to those third sector community groups in particular that are working directly with our communities locally.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, my second question is a little bit more complicated than the first one, and it's regarding the housing situation. So if I understand this correctly, some people, when they go through the process run by the UK government, and if they're able to stay in the UK, then I think it says in the report that some choose to move to other parts of the UK, but some stay here. And I think if I'm right in saying this, they are then declared homeless. So I'm wondering if we've then got a sudden influx of people who, if I understand the kind of housing structure properly, they'll then be at the top of the list. And is that putting an undue pressure on of other people within Perth and Kinross who may have been at that point and have now been kind of pushed down the list a little bit because there's more people at the top of that list? If I understand this correctly, I may not.
Martin, yeah.
Hi, thanks for the question. So I assume you're referring to the asylum seekers in hotels. So the process is that they're accommodated by the Home Office, and when their asylum claim's decided, if it's accepted, they're then given 28 days notice to leave that accommodation, and they're effectively eligible for homeless assistance anywhere in the UK. So some, in terms of the hotels in Perth, some people make a presentation to Perth and Kinross Council. Quite a substantial number of others go to Glasgow, Edinburgh, or down to England and make that presentation. So where somebody's had their asylum claim accepted and they make a homeless presentation to us, they effectively automatically are accepted, because by definition they have been asked to leave the accommodation that the UK government provided. So they will be on the homeless list, if you like. Everyone with homelessness priority is on the same list, and it's theoretically ranked in order of the date of application. So the oldest applications would be at the top. The sort of practical reality is that everybody on the list is looking for something slightly different, so a different size of property, different areas, etc. So it's not as simple as just allocating the next vacancy to the person who's number one on the list. But there is an impact in terms of numbers of people coming through that process, which is affecting, has an increase effect on the overall homelessness presentations and also the demand for temporary accommodation.
Yeah, thanks for that answer. That was framed much better than my question. So thank you for that. Can you give us a sort of scale of numbers? So how many people would have been in the homelessness part of the list, and how many more are being added into it? And this is maybe a comment more than a question, but it just seems a little bit unfair that the UK government are kind of serving us with this problem, if you like, as in giving the people notice to leave. They know they're going to present somewhere, but I'm assuming we don't get any more money to deal with that problem. Is that right?
Yeah, so unlike a lot of the report is focused on the formal resettlement schemes, which effectively give people refugee status from the outset, and they come with funding packages over an extended period. So the asylum system is different, and someone who followed through the process that I just explained and made a homeless application to Perth and Kinross Council there is no funding that comes with them in the same way as a formal resettlement scheme. So somebody coming through the UKRS scheme, for example, which has a funding over 5 years that diminishes as someone becomes more independent. So that doesn't exist. And in terms of numbers, it's quite difficult to give numbers specifically for former asylum seekers. It is something that's monitored through our own data and the Scottish Government returns. And in 24-25, which is the most recent Scottish Government data set publication, we had 35 out of 861, 35 applications were former asylum seekers. And in the year to date, up until 2 or 3 weeks ago, when the information in the report was collated, we'd had another 28 homeless applications from former asylum seekers. And as of yesterday, we have 18 former asylum seekers currently in our temporary accommodation. So it is having an impact. It's not big percentages in the grand scheme of things, but it's it's another source of homelessness that's coming into the system.
Thank you, Convener. My question's on page 29 of the pack, and it's where we talk about the process for housing asylum seekers within local authorities. It says their participation in asylum dispersal is mandatory for all local authorities in the UK. Local authorities do not choose where the asylum accommodation is located. As we all know, there have been a number of rumours started in recent months about hotels and other buildings allegedly to get used to house asylum seekers, which are invariably wrong and immensely unhelpful to the situation. I just wondered if Elaine or someone could just explain a bit about what is the process if the Home Office are looking for accommodation within a local authority, ours or wherever, and what consultation or what contact would they have with us to advise us in advance that they were looking within our area? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure we have a Verity House agreement with them. Martin.
Hi, thanks for the question. So to kind of add to the response David provided about multi-agency arrangements, there is a sort of platform for regular dialogue with the Home Office, and beyond that, there's a formal process for identifying and notifying us of potential new accommodation. So the Home Office contract their obligations around this to a company called Mears, who cover the asylum accommodation programme in Scotland. Their role is to identify accommodation, and that could be it could be hotels, it could be individual flats, or opportunities for HMO accommodation, and they have the ability to enter into agreements with private landlords. They have the resources to buy properties, etc. And what essentially happens is they will identify a possibility, and then they send that through to the council, and the various services would have an opportunity to comment on what we feel is, whether we feel it's suitable or not. And then the Home Office technically don't have to take that information on board, but the reality is that we've hardly had any of these requests coming through. Mayors have found it extremely difficult to identify property in Perth and Kinross just because of all the challenges around the market that we know about, and they've typically focused their efforts on the Central Belt, where it's much easier for them to develop scale in terms of accommodation. So we've had the odd individual flat coming through, you know, as an individual opportunity to accommodate one or two people. We've provided feedback on those, and there's only one has been progressed by mayors. So all of the, if any of the sort of rumoured establishments or properties were actively being considered, we would know about it at a very early stage, and we'd have an opportunity to provide feedback, whether that was supportive or an objection.
Sorry, thank you. That's a very helpful answer. Thank you very much.
Just to add a little bit to that, we're also represented every fortnight at what's called an asylum national group, procurement and delivery it's called, and that talks about the Home Office are represented there, Scottish Government are represented there, COSLA are represented there. Any changes to Home Office policy across the country are discussed then and we're represented. For example, yesterday's meeting I attended, they are talking about a move away from moving single males into the country, and I know that's been one of the protest issues, if you like, to try and encourage families to come to Scotland, because when families first arrive, they tend to stay in England. There were 5 local authorities mentioned yesterday where those pilots will be initially taking place when families come, and Perth and Kinross is not one of them, if there's any media listening today.
Sorry, thanks, David. That is very helpful. And you're right. I hope the media do take it on board that you know, these rumours and speculation are very unhelpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Councillor Duff has asked one of the questions, and he's put it a lot better probably than me, but I think it's important that the media do pick up that there are no further hotels being chosen in Perth and Kinross, because these rumours do fly around. They come up, as you know, in an area very, very rapidly, and they go around on Facebook. The other point I wanted to follow up was with Martin, probably. It's another question that we get a lot of, I get a lot of comments on, and this is when people are seeking accommodation, and he touched on this, and I think it's just to be clear that whoever they are, they're assessed basically on the common allocation policy equally, whether asylum seekers or otherwise. I think this, I'm sure that's the case, and if it is, do we make that that system public enough so people realise that somebody in asylum seeker is not getting any preferential treatment? They are allocated the property based on their need. As Martin said, you know, they might want a certain type of property which other people don't want, and therefore that's the basis. But the question is, do we make the public aware enough that there is no preferential treatment, that everybody is treated equally in their common allocation policy when it comes across?
Martin?
I think that's a good question, Councillor Braun. There's so much misinformation in the public domain. I think anything we can do to clarify that is positive. I think that there's looking at some of the things you see on social media, you know, a lot of the stuff, I don't know where people come up with it, but there's definitely, you know, there's been a push on by people that are of a certain inclination to protest about hotels, and I'm not sure that they fully understand what it would mean if hotels were decommissioned, because there's a very high percentage success rate for asylum claims. So typically someone would move from a hotel into our communities, and I don't think that bit is fully understood by the general public, and that there's potentially more we can do to explain that.
Just to confirm, Councillor Bourne, once somebody becomes a former asylum seeker, they're treated in accordance with our allocation policy. There's no preference or anything like that. And I think that's really important to stipulate. We've put quite a lot of information on our website, and also through our community integration forum. But I think there is more to do there in terms of tackling that misinformation, and we need to do that through our comms plan that we've got in place.
Yes, I mean, I understood that, but I think it's very important the public get this picture across. I think it's I don't know how we could do it any more than we do, but it's important, I think, because I'm sure that's part of the process anyway. Thank you.
I suppose the advantage of having this paper here at a public meeting and the council able to do its own media on this, as we've done in the last couple of days about misinformation. I think that's important, but I think your point's very valid. Thank you, Bob. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, convener, and I appreciate that some of my question has already been covered in previous answers, but I'll ask anyway. Given the concerns with the protests and misinformation within social media, can you please explain how the council has supported the integration and well-being of people seeking sanctuary in Perth and Kinross, and in some way how is that differentiated from services provided by the hotel support provider Mears? I mean, do they in fact provide any on-site services? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We have an excellent relationship with Mears locally. That may not be the case across the country in other local authority areas, but that's been the case here since the word go. They have been very open and involved in our multi-agency discussions. They have been very open to support going into the hotels and also providing information about activities that are going on for their service users to access out with the hotels as well. And I think that will continue going forward as well. In terms of support around social media communication, we've got to get the balance right. We can put out a lot of good news stories, but unfortunately, as was evidenced a couple of weeks ago when Live Active Leisure put out a positive story about the football programme that Jeanfield Swifts are involved in, which is specifically for people seeking asylum and the wider refugee population. There was a pile on social media. There was an online petition started to stop that football programme. There's talk about a protest at a Jeanfield Swifts game coming up. So any positive story has got to be weighed up against the risk of putting that story out in the public domain now, unfortunately. So that is part of the discussion we had at the recent cohesion workshop, which is referred to in there, is everybody that was there that day was positive about the work that they are doing to support people, that the partnership working that's going on, the communication that's going on across sectors, but felt we could be doing more to promote that, to raise awareness of that. But as I say, how we do that and it's got to be weighed up against the risk of doing that as well, and putting the people that we're supporting at risk as well as the organisations that are supporting them.
Thank you. And do Mears actually have caseworkers on site that provide services to the residents?
Yes, there's a welfare officer in each hotel. And our liaison is with the manager of those welfare officers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, convener. My question was relating to page 34, 6.4. Wait till I just find it, sorry, so I can read it out. Yeah, it says there's been a range of communications issued in relation to this issue to do with bad behaviour and misinformation, etc. The Home Office have now provided a template for completion for any incidents of misinformation, disinformation or malinformation relating to this topic. I'm just wondering, what is the Home Office planning to do, are you aware, with the information which is fed back to them via this template? Thank you.
I can't speak for the Home Office, obviously, but we've completed that template 3 times now in relation to 3 separate elements of misinformation or disinformation, including most recently yesterday's a thing which is now in the front of the Courier today about the rumour about Kingdom Housing Association, or the false story about Kingdom Housing Association. So we complete it, we return it, and the Home Office, as far as we know, monitor it, and they have a risk scoring in that template as to the level of dis or malinformation that's recorded. I think that's then allocated a score against each local authority. So the more misinformation or disinformation that occurs, there's a kind of weighting goes against that. Similar to how the police record incidents that are occurring across the country at the moment in relation to the protests as well. They have a scoring system to risk assess that as well, and all of the incidents that are referred to in Appendix 2, I think it is in the report, have been reported in that way as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Section 5.2, third bullet point down, tells us that all new arrivals are offered a health assessment and support with GP registration, and this has been funded by the UK government. I assume that the same would apply to dentists and other healthcare type professionals. It's great to have the funding, but we don't really seem to have the doctors. So I'm wondering if any of the officers can give us some insight into the impact that this will be having on local doctors, or is there a secret supply of doctors somewhere that is being funded by the UK government that we don't know about?
I think I heard you say earlier you liked brief answers to your questions. So no, there's not a secret supply of doctors. In general terms, health and social care put an application in for an element of funding to provide a kind of triage service, if you like, a health impact assessment, health screening and backfill posts, which was to support that process. So how they calculated that, what they bid for, they got. And they obviously feel that's enough to support that process at the moment. I've got the exact amount if you want it, or the percentage of the overall sum, but you know, it was, they were invited, they applied because we recognised there would be pressures within health and social care, and then they got that allocation within the sum that was available.
Councillor McPherson.
Oh, thank you, Convener. It's just a quick question, really. And I note that Perth and Cross Council became a council of sanctuary in March 2024. I just wondered, do we know how many of the other 32 local authorities in Scotland are councils of sanctuary? Thank you.
As far as I know, we're still the only one in Scotland that is a council of sanctuary. There are other city of sanctuary work going on in other local authority areas in Scotland, but we're the only council of sanctuary. So there could be schools of sanctuary, there could be voluntary sector organisations who can apply to become a place of sanctuary. So within the city of sanctuary umbrella, there are different networks, but we're the only Scottish member of that at the moment.
Thank you. That's excellent to know, and that Perth and Kinross in that respect is leading the way. Thank you.
And I can say, Ian, that's only at the moment through COSLA meetings that I attend, and Peter attends them as well, that I've had communications and asked for support from other council areas for the work that we are doing. So others are looking towards us and what we're doing and looking to mimic a lot of the supportive things that we've put in place to make this a positive thing. Councillor Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Convener. You know, this paper, yeah, it's thank you for all your work and your team. You know, you're under pressure here. We have here in the appendix 4 sides of A4 with details of timelines of incidents relating to protests and all that's going on around it. I certainly know myself and my Liberal Democrat colleagues, we are concerned about all of this towards these human beings. My question is, how are the police dialing into this? Because this is we've spoken earlier in our committee meeting this morning about violence, about hate. This is hate, venomous hate that's been put out, and there's a pattern. There's a pattern of behaviour going on, and it's continual, and it's obviously going to keep continuing. It's not going to stop quickly. So my question is, how are the police dialing into this?
Locally, our community police colleagues have been very supportive. They attend both the regular asylum steering group, which took place fortnightly anyway, before any protests were ever envisaged, and a key part of the multi-agency group that now meets twice a week around the protests, both before and after, if any take place. Nationally, I think I possibly also mentioned that we're part of the a cohesion subgroup around this through COSLA's auspices again, which is jointly chaired by the Chief Executive of Glasgow City Council, the Chief Executive of the Scottish Refugee Council, but is attended by senior police representatives, Home Office representatives, MERS representatives, and representatives from each of the local authorities that have been affected by protests, of which there are 10 in Scotland, I believe. So yes, it's specialist police teams that attend the protests on a Saturday, so they're not necessarily local to the area. And I don't know how that how that response is felt to be on the day. I know some areas have experienced particularly nasty incidents going on. I know our colleagues in Falkirk have reached out for conversations recently in particular. I know Dundee are experiencing some different types of protests now. The accommodation that they had was not hotels. It was former sort of worky buildings or something. And the lease there was ending, so that accommodation is no longer being used. So the protests in Dundee are now targeting flats which young people seeking asylum are staying in. So different types of protests in different areas and different ways that they are policed. There are also police engagement officers who apparently speak to the protest organisers where they can, from both anti-asylum protesters and counter-protest organisers, just to try and get an understanding of what plans are before they take place. I know our senior managers have met with senior police officials locally about the response to that as well recently. So we're as tuned in with the police as we can be, I think.
Yes, thank you. It's more of, are the police managing to identify key people within what's getting driven here, persistently getting driven? Because it would be good to have an understanding that we're maybe just about on top of it, hearing the incident in Aberdeen where they can't put up Christmas decorations because of issues with lampposts and saltires and etc. You know, it's spreading, and it's quite a concern. But thank you for your answers.
Billy McLaren. Can you hear me now, Jamie?
I am now. Sorry, I don't have a little thing to put my hand up, so I'll have to physically put my hand up. I can help out with some of this from a policing point of view. I'm heavily involved in the protests within Tayside and how we react to that. And it's been for quite some time in terms of there's the National Operation Lest command structure in place, and we're seeing protests which is to do with asylum seeking related protests. And there's national meetings twice a week which we'll all dial into from the different divisions across Scotland, and we all are facing our own issues. I would say Tayside is it's certainly one that's very challenging, because at the minute, particularly in Dundee, we are getting the protests almost on a daily basis at this moment. That Reed Square, where they've now moved from the old university halls where there was up to 150 people staying, that is closing down. So that's where it all started, but it's moved across now to Reed Square, where there's 20 unaccompanied young asylum seekers, so people under 18 years old who who some of them had a horrific life up to this point, to then have this at their accommodation. So we're dealing with that on a daily basis. We are constantly trying to engage with the organisers. We've identified who the organisers are for Perth and Dundee. And I would say in terms of Perth, organisers easier to deal with than Dundee in terms of there is a bit of engagement. But it's very much, I would say, engagement is through our police liaison teams, who are specialised officers who try to maintain engagement throughout the week. And that's simply they're phoning up and just engaging in conversation to get them to give us information. Try to persuade them at times as well, but it's just to gain the information, so we're able to get that two-way communication to ensure that if there is a protest, we can put resource to it, and if we can influence change on it at all, we will do that. That's what we do. Every day we're working on that, and the challenge at the minute is certainly Dundee, because it's the right to protest, balancing that against the impact on the community, which is, I have to say, very significant. Perth has seen, just the last couple of weeks now, we've not had any protest activity in relation to that. So we'll continue that engagement to see if there is any intention to do anything, and try and ensure that we'll always be resourced for it. It's just ensuring we're fully up to speed with what's happening. And the problem with Dundee is there's some engagement, there's some that isn't, and they just go as and when. We will take stronger measures with that, because we've allowed we've allowed protest for a considerable time, and it's certainly at the point now, I would say we'll have to be with legislation, be stronger in terms of how we manage that. I don't think we're there in Perth at this moment in time, but if we have to be, we certainly will be, because we'll have to balance. People, yes, can protest, but it's that balance with the significant impact on the community, or serious disorder that it can bring to the community. So we're constantly weighing that up, and there is legislation there to put conditions on protests, etc., which we will use. We're certainly going to use, because these are just so frequent now and such an impact on the community, that we will start to use legislation where we impose conditions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your input on this question. Again, thank you for staying on the committee for this paper at the end of the agenda. Councillor Forbes, you have another question?
Yeah, last question, and I don't see this to be awkward in any way at all, or appear to be pedantic, but in Appendix 2, the phrase unauthorised filming is used quite a lot, specifically outside hotels, and I'm just wondering why we've chosen to use the word unauthorised, because it's not illegal to film anyone or anything in a public place.
Because they're claiming to be auditors, and they're not. They're going into hotels and saying they're doing an audit, and they're not. It's unauthorised entry to the hotels. It's where people stay. It's their home, for all intents and purposes. So yeah, it's unauthorised, and I wouldn't shy away from using that terminology.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The report, as I'm sure you'll know, breaks down into specifics where it will say unauthorised filming inside the hotel, and completely agree with you on that point. Going into a building and filming is illegal, and therefore would by definition be unauthorised. But filming outside is not illegal, and therefore I would challenge the use of the word unauthorised in that context. And sorry to be pedantic, but I think it's important that we're accurate.
I'm noted.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions on this paper at this time. I have copies here of the political leaders' joint statement and the statement that has come from our community safety councillors who are in the community safety group. And, you know, we have discussed things here today that are both in those reports and issues that we have issued as a council up to this point. I suppose the one thing that I want to highlight here is that, you know, we do defend the right to peaceful protest. We all do. We've all in our own times in our own political spheres been involved in a protest or a march at some point, and we have the right to do that, and everybody has the right to do that, and we support that as a council, and we support that as a community. But to hear that fear and alarm is being used to scare organisations like Genefield Swifts, I think is beyond what is right. It's not correct. Creating fear so that people don't stand up for what they believe in is not what we believe. People are allowed to have their peaceful protest, say what they believe, say what they think, say how they think society should be. And I don't think society has any problem with that. But you can't have activities where you create fear and alarm in the community so that others don't engage and create a positive place in and have that inclusion within our community. So I will now move the report. I'm pleased to present the Council Sanctuary Year 1 annual update to the committee. This report provides a comprehensive overview of the significant progress made in our commitment to supporting refugees and people seeking asylum in Perth and Kinross. Our work as a council of Sanctuary is firmly aligned with our vision of a Perth and Kinross where everyone can live well, free from poverty and inequality. This commitment is underpinned by our wider equalities objectives to eliminate discrimination, advance equality of opportunity and foster good relations across all communities. Since being officially recognised as a Council of Sanctuary in September 2024, Perth and Kinross Council has demonstrated leadership and innovation in supporting sanctuary-seeking populations. We have welcomed individuals and families from a diverse range of backgrounds, including those arriving through the Homes for Ukraine programme, Afghan, Sudanese and Syrian resettlement schemes, as well as people seeking asylum accommodating locally. Our multi-agency approach ensures that all our new arrivals receive holistic support, including health assessments, access to education and opportunities for community integration and personal development. The report also acknowledges the challenges faced over the past year, including local protests and concerns raised by residents. We've responded proactively by establishing a multi-agency group to address these issues, ensuring transparency, safety and community cohesion. Our approach has been recognised as good practice and requested by other local authorities. Furthermore, our work has been received national recognition, including a ministerial statement in the Scottish Parliament, highlighting the positive impact of our efforts. I'd like to emphasise that the Council's commitment to being a place of sanctuary is not only reflective in our policies and action plans, but also evident in the lived experience of those we support. The continued engagement with partners, community groups, and people with lived experiences ensures that our work remains relevant, responsive and effective. In moving this report, I ask the committee to note its contents, approve the continued work outlined in the action plan. This will enable us to build on our achievements, address ongoing challenges and reaffirm our commitment to support all those who seek sanctuary in Perth and Kinross. I am happy to accept the recommendations and move the report as approved. Can I ask Councillor McCall to second the report, please?
Thank you, Convener. In seconding this report, I wish to take the opportunity to commend the officers on the outstanding progress that has been made since Perth and Kinross was awarded Council of Sanctuary status. I also wish to wholeheartedly welcome our refugees, our new Scots, who have arrived in Perth and Kinross seeking sanctuary either via established resettlement schemes or as a result of a successful asylum claim. Special mention must go to our local communities who have welcomed and supported integration of refugees into their communities and into their lives. The community engagement demonstrates the best in our fellow citizens and should be celebrated. However, it is disheartening that there is so much misinformation being promoted, mainly via social media, against those seeking asylum. It is somewhat pertinent that today we've debated about actions against violence against women and girls, as those peddling misinformation and organising protests are, in my view, deliberately targeting and tapping into the fear that every woman has about her personal safety. It's cynical, harmful and unsettling. As has been mentioned already by colleagues here today, all refugees and those seeking asylum are human beings, many with very harrowing life experiences, and we should not forget that. So I wholeheartedly second the recommendations in this paper and look forward to delivering on the action plan described herein. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have comments from Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener, and thank you both to yourself and the Vice Convener for your proposing and seconding of this report. I think immigration and asylum are among the most pressing issues in British politics today, and sadly the national debate has become dominated by fear and division. I think here in Perth and Kinross we've benefited from a stronger local political consensus and are trying as a Council of Sanctuary to offer a different path, one that's rooted in compassion, fairness and practical solutions. Convener, we have previously discussed Perth's history of welcoming those fleeing war and persecution here. People from all over the world have enriched our economy, our culture and our communities. And we have rightly offered a safe haven and supported refugees going back to the First World War, where Belgian families were welcomed to Perth. In recent times, when we've responded positively and compassionately to the needs of Syrian and Afghan families, to Sudanese refugees fleeing war and persecution, and most recently to 358 people from the ongoing daily bombing of civilians enduring the horrors of Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Our commitment is demonstrated to supporting children seeking asylum, children who have lost everything, including their parents and families, and who, but for the Council and our partners, would be alone in a strange new country. And sadly, these children have suffered incidents of abuse in our city centre, and we must condemn those who feel emboldened by misinformation to manifest that sort of hatred and abuse on young people in Perth. My party, the Liberal Democrats, believe that every person deserves dignity and respect, regardless of where they come from, that immigration should be fair, effective and humane, not a political football, and that we must reject the toxic rhetoric that pits communities against each other. And it has been really heartening to see that in Perth and Kinross, those values and beliefs are shared across the political spectrum in this chamber and amongst our key third sector and charity groups, our community anchor organisations, churches and faith groups, community planning partners, and visibly by members of the public gathering to counter-demonstrate against racism and hatred in our community under the banner of Perth Against Racism. And Convener, you and I have stood with colleagues in this chamber as part of those counter-demonstrations, have been appalled by the behaviour of the anti-asylum protesters whose real attitude towards women in our community have been demonstrated with verbal and physical aggression and obscenity. Behaviours which in any other situation or walk of life would have seen police intervention and arrest. And thankfully, recently, they have been. And I don't underestimate how difficult and demanding the task is to police these demonstrations and to manage this. And I want to express my gratitude and appreciation to the police for doing so. But now we are seeing misinformation on social media, as we've discussed, totally baseless claims about asylum accommodation at Kilgraston School and Leslie Court, picked up and amplified by the local press and designed to foster a hostile environment to asylum and immigration. And I want to commend our comms teams and officers for the work that they're doing to try and counter these lies. And to be honest, that's a hard job when you look at the national picture. Shabana Mahmood's new proposals, 20-year waits for settlement, repeated status reviews and asset seizures are frankly cruel and unworkable. They create uncertainty, push refugees into exploitation and undermine integration. Our care system has been hugely reliant on immigration to sustain its workforce. Previously, people had a clear 5-year route to independent leave to remain. Mahmood's proposal stretches that to 20 years is simply a punishment. It means 20 years of insecurity, anxiety, telling dedicated workers, even though you care for our elderly and our disabled loved ones, you still haven't earned the right to call this country home, and that cannot be right. As a Council of Sanctuary, we will continue to stick to our principles, to stand for compassion and fairness, protect those in danger, promote human dignity and justice through the asylum system, and work to deliver successful integration of new Scots into our community. And as a Council of Sanctuary, we'll continue to counter misinformation designed to spread fear and alarm, bust the myths perpetrated to sow division, and instead maintain community cohesion and deliver successful integration. I want to thank everyone here who has contributed to the work that's contained in this update, and I offer my ongoing support and assistance in any way that we can, stand in solidarity with officers and with our community planning partners and organisations in the face of bullying and intimidation. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett, and I think it's well recognised in this council. Your passion and drive on these issues is well recognised across the whole council area and nationally that I have seen at COSLA. So thank you very much for your comments. Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. You've said a lot of what I wanted to say. Councillor McLaren has, Councillor Barrett has, but I just think we should re-emphasise the concern we should have for these protests. People are worried about immigration, rightly so. I mean, that's a fair comment. That's across the country, but in this modern day and age of social media, it's very easy for a minority to whip up the concerns into a hatred that goes beyond control. It's not unique to Perth and Ross or Scotland or the UK. It's right across Europe now. These more extreme people now have a hate figure. We know where that road leads to. I've said it before. Civilization has been along that road and been to the very end of it. We are a long way from the end of that, but we are back on that road again, and we need to do everything we can to stop this. And as I say, Councillor Barrett and Councillor McLaren, you have all said far more eloquently, because I've nothing written down what I wanted to say, but I think we should be rightly concerned about these protests. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and it can very easily spread and gain a foothold in politics, the mainstream politics, if we're not careful. And I can only finish by that old adage that the only thing for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. And I think that's where we need to be warned on that. So thank you for convening.
And thank you, Councillor Braun, for your words. Thank you for your support on this issue. And I think you're completely right in what you're saying. Thank you. I have no further comments in the chat, so we're happy to agree the recommendations set out in this paper. As that's the end of our business of the agenda, can I thank everyone for your attendance today and all your contributions, and now formally close the meeting.